And so like Jeffrey ended to mention, though all of these things are happening, though people are being faced or experiencing all this adversity, people are fighting back, people are resisting, and people are organizing. And that's has been much of the legacy of folks of color, especially in this country, is that there's been this strong amount of culture and history around organizing and fighting back. And so now we have panelists who I'm very excited to hear from talk about how they're fighting back and how they're thinking about or how they're recreating safety both in schools and communities. Ready? Yeah. All right. So the way the panel is going to work is I'm going to ask about 3 questions, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. There are microphones throughout the audience. I'll let you know when it's time or when it's appropriate, but do feel free when it's time to come up and ask questions, and then the panelists will get a chance to answer. And so before we get into the question part, I'd like for the panelists to take a few minutes to introduce themselves, like where they're from and what they do, what is their work. So we can start down with we can start there.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Heather Sattler, and I'm a teacher at the Alliance School, which is a charter school in the Milwaukee Public Schools. And I'm really fortunate to have 2 of our students with us today. So I want to start with a really beautiful quote by Nell Noddings. She said that the aim of education is to reveal an attainable image of self that is lovelier than the manifested one that is manifested in his or her present acts. So at Alliance, we really believe that people behave the way they do for a reason. So we like to hold people accountable for their action, but at the same time, we try to understand why people behave the way that they do and try to address those underlying issues. One of the ways that we do this is through restorative justice practices. So I teach a restorative justice class, and Summer is one of my students in that class. The students are trained to be circle keepers. So they learn to work on themselves in the context of a circle, and they learn to ask powerful questions to support the growth of other students. So the way the process works is we receive referrals from staff and students. So a student might be having a problem with another student, a staff member might be having a problem with a student, or there might be a continual discipline problem that a student is having. So then students can volunteer to come to the circle, and if they choose not to, they don't have to. But essentially, once we're in the circle, we try to understand the facts that are going on in the situation, any feelings associated with what's happening. And if any of you know restorative justice, there's a really kind of simple 4-step formula, but it's really more complex than this. Then we get into who is harmed by that person's action. We look at how the harm can be repaired and who is affected. And there's a really important piece. The person who's responsible for the harm is acting for some reason. And so we try to get at the needs of that person and look and see what we need to do as a community to support that person in order to make a sustainable change. Once we figure out what a fix will be for the situation, the students complete an agreement, and our students actually follow up with that person to see if they've completed their end of the agreement. Parents are notified, and that's how the circle process closes. It's really a beautiful and dynamic process, and its roots are in Native American tradition. And so more powerful than me telling you about the process and why I believe it's important, I think, is hearing from one of our circle keepers, Summer. How has being a circle keeper impacted your life, Summer?
It's been like, it's helped me fix conflicts that I've had and conflicts that other people have had, and it's helped me to ask questions about why they're starting this or why the other person is doing this to them, and just helping them out and seeing if they can become friends or just acquaintances and be civilized with each other and just act the way they're supposed to around each other, not always lashing out at each other, and just see what's going on between them and their situation. And this is Lily. She will be explaining how restorative justice has impacted her.
We're going to be playing past the microphone a little bit up here. Bear with us.
Well, hello, I'm Lily. It helped me by overcoming my anger issues. very bad temper, and I had a bad issue that I had to deal with before my life was changed in a bad way. And so when I joined the circle and did the circle, it really started helping me out and notice more of the good things that could happen instead of looking at the bad things and what I wanted to do to the person and what I could have did to the person.
It's true.
And and I use the tools of that they help me with, like doing yoga, exercising, and things like that, to keep me in tune with myself and not lashing out on the negative things that bothered me. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. The restorative justice practices that they were speaking about is one of the alternative discipline models that Jeffrey was talking about, or alternatives to punitive measures that Jeffrey was talking about. Next.
Hello, I'm Anaïs Sanchez, and I've been a community organizer for quite some time now. I've done a lot of work in the immigrants' rights movement, being that I myself am a queer immigrant, a Mexican immigrant. So my start was there, but my struggle had always been finding a space within the immigrant movement as a queer, Latina, Mexicana, whatever I chose to identify as, and building that identity. And so I've also worked within the foundation world as an LGBT programmer for an LGBT foundation here in Milwaukee. And so with the topic being queer people of color, queer, trans, two-spirit people of color, I will be focusing on my conversation on how it's really vital to have space for youth, for elders, for everyone to grow as not only an LGBT person, not just as a person, but as a person of color. And the differences between being a person of color and that is queer and a person that is not of color identified. A lot of my struggle was building that space, right? In movements where that space didn't exist, where that space wasn't respected, and most likely because it wasn't, okay, I was told I wasn't loud enough. In that space where, people don't understand why it's necessary to be there, why we need to create that. So I guess that would be my focus, but yeah, nice to meet you all.
Hello, my name is Pedro Perez, and I've been a youth immigrant rights organizer for 5 years. I'm here representing, yes, Youth Empowered in the Struggle, as well as Voces de la Frontera. And pretty much what I will be focusing on is pretty much building leadership among Latinos, LGBT youth through organizing through the immigrant rights movement. A lot of people don't really understand how the immigrants' rights movement and the LGBT movement go hand in hand. And I am actually an example. I used to be undocumented for a while, and as well as an LGBT student. While that was going on, I didn't have a safe space. I didn't know where to go. I had two worlds. And at the end, I'm here representing both. As well, through the immigrant rights movement, you're able to build leaders, because in the immigrant rights movement, once you see the people who struggle, the people what they go through, and their leadership skills, you're able to be comfortable. When you're comfortable as an immigrant, in the skin, as an immigrant in your skin, you're able to claim your other identity, which is being an LGBT student or LGBT activist. And being an LGBT in a Latino world, it's really, a queer, actually, it's taboo. It's a lot. It's really hard. But at the end, at the end, I'm part of both worlds, so I'll be talking about that. Nice to meet y'all.
Hi everybody, I'm Alex Shabazz. I've been here representing Freedom Inc., and so is Young here. Freedom Inc. is a nonprofit agency. We fall into the social justice agency, but Freedom Inc. is really more than that. We are a racial, economic, gender, immigration, land, justice agency, right? So really, I like to say, like, we're the people justice agency, you know what I'm saying? Because we fight for the justice of the people, you know what I'm saying? And and so basically, our main focus is to end violence within and against communities of color, right? So we do this by creating culturally specific spaces to work out the internal oppressions, challenge power structures, empower the lives of, empower people to take back power and create change, and to, also to affirm identities to truly create change. And all these things are necessary to impact the lives of the people most affected. And we are the people most affected, right? That's why we do the work, you know what I'm saying? So basically, that's what I'm going to be talking about, is how, like, we do different things. We work on different types of work. For example, we work on domestic violence. We also work on queer issues, right? But all those identities and all those struggles are linked, right? Because one group can't be liberated without the other one, right? Our liberation is all linked, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, that's what I'm here to talk about.
Alex pretty much said it all.
You want to see my notes? I think I should have told you.
Yeah, Alex pretty much said it all. I'm Zhong, in case you guys didn't catch that. And yeah. So I worked deeply with the Southeast Asian girls, youth, and like what Alex said, we do a lot of organizing around what impacts us the most. So as one of our t-shirts, our campaign, our community is our campaign. We revolve around our community. They choose what's important for them to work on. Yes, and it's culturally specific.
Oh, I can add something.
And so Freedom Inc. put together a video for you all.
I think for the most part, like, I think it's a really big challenge just being a youth of color, like, already. Like, just being a brown person is, like, a really big challenge, like, from racism and classism and, like, sexism, like, all of those other isms. And then on top of that, being queer is, like, you're almost, like, banished from your own community. So the people who you, like, bond with to be, like, strong against all these isms could be the same people who turn around and, like, cast you out. Like homophobia and bullying and stuff like that.
I think queer youth of color face all types of challenges, and I think too often when we think about the experience of queer youth, we think about kind of like what the hot topics are. We think about teen suicide, for example, or we think about bullying in schools, or we think about the fear or the anxiety around coming out, or like body dysphoria. So while they experience all of that, it also happens in the context of fear around being deported if you're undocumented. It also happens in the context of being perceived as a black man, right? And so like police brutality also happens in the context of really high incarceration rates, poverty, homelessness, drug abuse, alcohol abuse. So really they are experiencing kind of all of the things that are talked about as queer issues and all of the things that are talked about as issues and struggles that people of color face, intertwined all at the same time at once.
I know in my culture there's not really a word for being queer, and there's no support group that you can really go to, you know, get support and like, because I see that a lot in, you know, more of the white queer community than in the Hmong queer community, because there's no word for it. Everybody just kind of closes that off. It's taboo to even speak about it, and you know, there's no support so far.
Freedom Inc. is a nonprofit organization, and we started predominantly providing services to Southeast Asian women and girls. And then naturally, the young boys were coming through and saying, well, we need services too. And our motto has always been about community organizing as a means to ending violence against women and girls. That alone, by providing services, it wasn't going to do anything. I think it's important to understand that also that you also have to provide services in order to help people to understand what the issues are, but ultimately that organizing and mobilizing and community, like our community is our campaign, as we've always said, is the most important piece of Freedom Inc.
So here at Freedom Inc. we have a group called Plus, People Like Us, and it is a Black organizing group for Black queer youth. And basically what we do is we create that safe space for Black queer youth to just get together, you know, be in the space where they get to be all of themselves and talk about some of the issues that they face, so that they can address them. So we empower them so they can address some of the issues they face themselves, but also give them the resources to address some of these issues, and give them like political education, so that, like I said, so they can empower themselves to address the things that affect them.
How come you guys think, why is it that we don't ever bring up gay issues to our family?
Because it makes so much. Because it's like for the Hmong, Sakat, whatever, how you say it. So like the Hmong community, it's not like,
It's like a disgrace. Like, oh, your son is gay. That's a disgrace. And it's like, oh, your daughter likes women. That's a disgrace.
I joined Freedom Inc. Core Youth, and plus like people like us, and pretty much we work, try to develop like a space where we can grow and be ourselves. So pretty much what I shooting towards is just being myself, and also influencing others to take that and kind of like learn from it and have better knowledge of how they should treat others, or just to be comfortable around people like me.
I do a lot of like queer work, with youth, and I just like teach them to like celebrate their queerness when it's safe. Like, don't be afraid of who you are. Don't be afraid to like challenge people who like try to down what you say. But we also teach a lot of safety.
We cannot be a social justice, social change agency without being a queer agency also.
I got my crew now, I got my juice now, I got my true style.
That's the Freedom Inc. video. I was giving a thumbs up to the camera person. All right, so now it's time to get into questions. And though I do appreciate the round of applause that you all are generously giving everyone, I'm going to ask that people hold the applause to the end, because we are getting short on time, if folks are okay with that. All right, so the first question that I have for folks is to describe the importance of doing racial justice work while doing LGBTQ justice work. So whichever panelists want to jump in.
I can jump in. I think queer movement work is social justice work. You can't really divide that, right? So to say that it is unimportant to do social justice work is almost to say you're not doing queer movement work. And it could be anything from, you know, whatever you call action. It could be a protest, it could be changing something in your school, it could be changing something big, or this queer movement work, the social justice work could be something within ourselves. I think from my example, from my experience in organizing, anything really, there's such a high burnout rate because we have so much pressure on ourselves to do the work that we know is so necessary because we ourselves experience that struggle. But doing things like taking care of ourselves and holding ourselves accountable for nurturing ourselves is social justice work and is very much necessary within the queer movement.
So I think racial justice work is important when doing queer work because, first of all, there's a lot of racism within the queer justice work that's going on. Like a lot of times people will be like, oh, I'm gay, you're gay, so, you know, we're in this struggle together, you know what I'm saying? But you don't think about the other experiences I have as being a Black queer person in America, you know what I'm saying? It's a very different experience. And you know, when people talk about like, you know, achieving like true solidarity and things, you know what I'm saying? And like people don't, you know, take those things into account. And when I'm rambling, okay. So they're, first of all, like fighting against that racism inside the queer movement, but also like people of color are not, when you see the forefront of the queer movement, you don't normally see a person of color, you know what I'm saying? And when you see little youth of color and they're like, you know, I'm gay, but it seems like all the gay people are white, you know what I'm saying? Like growing up, I thought it meant you were white to be gay, you know? But these movements are linked because I'm Black and I'm gay, but I'm not Black or gay. Like I'm all the time Black and gay, like that's who I am, you know what I'm saying? So when I do Black work, I'm doing queer work, you know what I'm saying? And then when I do queer work, I'm doing Black work, period. Like there's no separation, there's no dividing and conquer, no, that's what I do, you know what I'm saying? That's who I am. And so it's very important to know that to do racial justice work within the queer work, because you can't truly be my ally unless you are being an ally to all of my identities. And you can't say you're my ally because I'm queer if you are not trying to end racism, because therefore you're not my ally. You need to also be my ally to my Blackness, you know what I'm saying? Like she wrote an article that she so brilliantly titled, my race is Black and so is my gender, right? So I'm Black all the time, period. So to truly be my ally and to truly do the work, queer work, you also have to do racial justice work, period.
And I'll just add one thing to both those points are super important. I guess the urgency I sense now for doing racial justice work as the LGBT movement is that there's a very, at least with the educational justice organizers that I've been working with, there's a very real sense that the POC majority that we are on a trajectory towards is going to be an undereducated, incarcerated majority, and that actually the political forces that are in place now are lining up all of these policies and all of these systems. The number of prisons is being calculated by the number of Black students there are, like that. There is a very real urgency in making sure that education that once was an equalizer in our communities, and you knew if you got a good education, then you would be able to maybe advance your life, that is not the case anymore for young people of color going to school, and that for this movement to be a movement for the 21st century, it needs to have people of color at the forefront, it needs to have the most vulnerable voices in our movement speaking up, it needs to have the most vulnerable voices in the leadership.
I
think we're talking about human rights, period. And the work that we do with young people at Alliance is really all about liberation, because if you're clear about who you are and where you stand, then you have the power to move and to make change. Lily has something to say.
So the theme of the conference is about rethinking safety in schools and communities. So if the panelists would talk a little bit about what would a safe school or a safe community look like for you or your peers or the queer youth that you all work with?
I can go first again. I like talking, apparently. So I think that a lot of things, right, we'd have to look at in order to make a safe school or a safe community or a safe place for queer, trans, two-spirit people. But one of the things that I would caution to do first would be to make sure that we're not only reacting to what's there, not only just looking at, oh, there's this bullying and this violence, let's do something to stop it, rather also act from a different place, act from a place that doesn't come from reaction, rather from action before anything negative can happen. While the bullying is, to stop that is very important, and I'm not belittling that at all, it's important to take a look at what else we can do, even the way that we teach family to our youth. And the way that we talk about family structure is really important, right? When we talk about a nuclear family in this country, we all are fed to think of, you know, a mom, a dad, and, you know, hetero couple and babies, basically. And I think a really important thing would be to identify where that comes from and look at that frame, while not dismiss it because it is something that is so pervasive in our culture, to look at it, identify it as a simple lens from what the greater American culture teaches us, but also to look at our own histories as people of color, right? And as Native people too, or as different peoples have always identified being queer, being two-spirit as a positive thing. Not all cultures, but with colonization, a lot of that was gone. But like, for example, I don't know how familiar everyone here is with this, but a lot of cultures in Mexico, in Oaxaca, two-spirit people here in what is now the US, have always been respected and revered as really important people in the culture, people that are, people come to for knowledge, to name their babies as these really important people, but our culture switches that around. So I think a really important way to just restructure our safety is to restructure our lenses and just look at those. Yeah, sorry I rambled.
So when I think about what it means to make my community and my people safe, like what it means to make safer communities, I think about like, what does it mean to be safe, right? So of course I would say ending homophobia, ending racism, ending sexism, all that, right? But it's also like I feel like being safe is your ability to live and be healthy without anybody else being able to negatively affect that, right? So it's like my community can't be safe from homelessness unless there's housing doesn't cost anything. Like, why should your ability to live in a shelter cost money, right? Because a lot of my people are poor, right? So that is unsafe if you're homeless, right? My community can't be safe from hunger unless food doesn't cost money, like, period. Like, you may think I sound like a socialist or whatever, but call me whatever. Like, I just feel like our basic needs have been commodified, right? So, and like a lot of, in the movement, we talk about what, like, the true needs of the people, because we are the people that lead it and we know our needs. And if our people need food, we need shelter, we need water, you know what I'm saying? We need safe space. That's what it means to create a healthier community, right? It means ending police brutality. It means getting rid of the drugs in our community. It means getting better education in the schools, you know what I'm saying, for all youth of color, right? So they're safe from not being able to grow, right? So that's what it means to me to make a safer community.
Thank you.
I believe a safe school to me is a school where I should be able to walk down the hall and not worried about looking over my shoulder worrying about the group of people that doesn't like me because the way I dress or the way that I present myself. I feel that if I would be able to walk through halls and not look over my shoulder, worrying about those things, the school would be safer. Or being able to go to the restroom without having to lock the door and make sure that you're the only one in there to, do what you have to do. Or, walk around the school building to be exact and, just be you without anyone having anything to say. And community-wise, I really don't know because a community-wise is going to be a community. Your neighborhood is going to be its neighborhood. You can't really too much change it. That's how I feel.
Thank you. At this time, we're gonna take a few questions from the audience if folks have questions. The mics are there and there. Is it a switch on there?
You can yell.
Hello? Okay. Hi, my name is Chloe. I'm from the ACLU, and my question is on the topic of punitive discipline that, Jeffrey, you talked about in your presentation. My question is, in your opinion, what's your opinion on the practice of using electroshock tasers as restraint and discipline tools on students, and what kind of advice would you offer to schools and officials who've resorted to using what I consider these kind of corporal punishments?
No, stop.
Stop it.
Stop.
I'm sorry?
I have to exhale when I hear that question in a really big way. How about building relationships with young people so that if someone is in so much distress, there's an opportunity to help that person get to a safe space within the school. So it's important to have multiple safe spaces and sit down and figure out what's really going on with that person. And so really at the core, one of the core elements of safety is having a relationship with students.
I guess my more serious response would be that that we need to move back towards a time when we see young people as assets and things to invest in, and not as problems that we need to shock and zap out of here. So I think that any solution that or any disciplinary action that actually involves talking to the young person as an individual, getting to know them as a unique, awesome, amazing, fabulous asset that the state has that is worth investing in because this is your future, is the system that we need to return to.
And I feel communication is a big thing. I feel like every student should at least have one teacher or one person in their school that they should be able to talk to. Even as an educator, you should, if you really see a student in trouble or something like that, you should just reach out and really be an educator.
Hi, I'm Abby Swetson. I am an 8th grade teacher, but I used to be an emotional and behavioral disorders special ed assistant. And when I was, a student of color attacked me and took me out of work for a week. And practically nothing was done in a disciplinary way, and we did have restorative justice, and I love it. But every time I hear about the school-to-prison pipeline and how horrible we are to have punitive measures against our students, I think of the fact that I had to go to urgent care 3 times that week, and I have trouble with the idea that nothing was done to make this student understand that something was wrong with what she did because she did it again later in the year. So I guess my question is, while I love restorative justice and think it is the right way to go, how is it that we are still able to instill in young students who need to understand that certain things are just wrong without making it too much about relationship. I had an amazing relationship with this child. That's why she attacked me and not someone else. So I have a problem with this. I feel like I know both sides, but I can't deny the fact that I was injured. So if somebody could please share something that would help me get through that, I'd appreciate it.
Wait a minute. So, big question, right? Right. I'm gonna try to be succinct here, and I know you, right? So know that I'm saying this to you respectfully. I think something about that was really interesting, that the fact that the youth you mentioned was the youth of color, right? Because white students do a lot of things, right? But that's not brought up in the context of punitive measures, right? So I just want to point that out, that there was some racialization there. Now on the subject of now a little further is I think all types of things happen, right? That shouldn't happen. I'm operating off of a belief, right? That's beyond the individual actions of any one person or student. And my belief fundamentally, right, is that violence is not going to solve or rectify any form of violence. And tasing people, shocking people, putting people in cages, shackling them, teaching them that they are less than, dehumanizing them is a form of violence, I believe, right? And so that causes me to think about a bigger or a different answer. And so yes, you're right. Yes, it is hard. It is very hard. And I don't claim that this is easy work. I don't think that people signed up or came in here because we thought it was so easy, right? But I think we're all here because we know that we have to do something different, because the systems put in place is what caused that child to be violent altogether, right? And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't know, things aren't going to change altogether tomorrow. And it is unfortunate that it happened to you. I do not dismiss that, right? But I know the answer isn't to further shackle or break down the human character of that person, right? Because if we're talking about punitive measures are not rehabilitative. They do not cause, there's no studies, no science, and the immense amount of research done on these punitive measures that actually say they improve character, that actually say they cause a positive change in behavior. And so if the history of this education system has been doing that for hundreds of years and it isn't working, then I think it's upon us to do something different or do something better, right? It may or may not be circles for everybody. It could be a different alternative, but I know it's not the current violence that we use to break down kids.
I want to say I'm really sorry that that happened to you, and I think there's many modalities. And one thing about restorative justice practices and circle work is that in order for it to be successful, people need to come to that work ready to take responsibility for their part in the harm. And so there's a lot of preparation that needs to be done ahead of time when something like that happens. And I don't think that there is any panacea, and I think that every situation is really different. And one more note, that sometimes the kids with whom we have the deepest relationship feel the safest with us and act out in inappropriate ways because they don't know other ways. And so then it's really important for us to establish our boundaries and do healing work within ourselves and be really, really clear about where we stand so that we can kind of go back and figure out where our boundaries are and what they are. And I don't mean in any way to say like I'm preaching to you, but I'm saying that it's really important for us to be really clear about our boundaries. And I think it's a work in progress as we continue to assess ourselves as professionals and people.
So that's the closing of the panel. I thank you all. Well, I thank the panelists well for sharing their work. And also, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Okay.
I'm Rebecca Rennick. I'm from Badger High School in Lake Geneva, and I feel as in the Midwest, Lake Geneva's a pretty small town. I feel in the Midwest that we've built up this reputation that our small towns are intolerant of whether it be race or culture or religion or sexual identity or sexual orientation. I feel as if we have this reputation, and it can make it a really hostile environment for students who are looking to come out or looking to be themselves. I personally know that I am one of a handful at my 1,600 student school that is out and open with their sexuality. What do you think the best steps are towards making progress, towards making our school more open and inviting to these students that believe this reputation?
Well, what did your name? Okay.
go first.
Thank you. Actually, about, what was it, a few months ago, there was a youth social justice forum here run by the American Civil Liberties Union that Chloe's a part of. She spoke earlier. And I gave a workshop on gay-straight alliances and starting those in schools, right? And a lot of what we did before we got into that conversation was asking the students there about the climate in their schools. And actually, most of the students in the room weren't queer identified, which took me by surprise because more than likely, students won't think that it's an issue that affects them unless they identify as queer, which I know is not true, and a lot of us know is not true. But I think one of the most powerful things about that space was that when we first started, a lot of the youth were dismissive to having those conversations. They thought, because I'm not queer, and because it's so hard and it's so violent and so, and everyone is so close to having those conversations, that they were hesitant to even start. But when we got into it, when we really had personal stories come out about personal experiences with violence, with discrimination, it's when the youth started sticking up for each other. And this group of Before Strangers, coming from all different high schools in Wisconsin, started forming a little pact, sort of, and started speaking to each other and telling each other, you know what, I am straight, and I never really thought about this, but I'm gonna go start a gay-straight alliance at my school, or start having conversations. So I would say, from that experience and from other personal experiences, that the most important part would be to begin those conversations, to just even start the space to begin those conversations.
I think those schools in these small towns have that reputation a lot of times because they come from somewhere, you know what I'm saying? So it's not like these youth feel uncomfortable for no reason, you know what I'm saying? And I think the question is not how to make them change how they feel about it, but to change the area, you know, change the situation. So if you're wondering how to make queer youth feel more comfortable and feel like they could come out, try addressing homophobia in your school and in your town, you know what I'm saying? If you're wondering how to make youth of color feel more comfortable, you know, try addressing race issues, you know, yeah.
This has to be it, I heard. So I guess my one insight would be that, particularly for small towns, that the school and the community are integrally linked. And so work in the community is necessarily work in the schools. And the portfolio that I work in, the national team at GSA Network, is mainly the southeastern states, so Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee. And so what we're seeing there is that if there's not a supportive community for a teacher to be an advisor of a GSA, you're not going to have a GSA. If the community runs out the person that's the advisor, you're not going to have a GSA. And so part of the work then is educating the other external forces in the community that impact what decisions get made at school. So either the PTA or the school board or folks that are supportive of that individual person. But I would say that overall that it's linked to making sure that the community, it feels like a safe space as well as the school, because it's a small town. You know everyone. I grew up in a small town also.
So I want to say thank you to the panelists. And I also want to thank you all for participating, or I think you all were active, so I'll say participating, being participating audience members for the panel as well. And just closing out, thinking about, as we continue in our day at the conference and as we go back into our world and do the work that we all feel empowered to do to really help youth in schools, to really think deeply about what safety means, right? Like, so what does safety look like for LGBT youth, right? What does safety look like for youth like Trayvon? What does safety look like for the people in the room, and implement that in all of our work. So thank you and enjoy. Is there housekeeping? And enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.